Hello, angels. I'm tuning in today to talk specifically about what shadow work looks like in the context of sex magic. Those are the two kinds of magic that I do, shadow work and sex magic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience in that way and how I've cultivated a practice of shadow work within sex magic. So first, let's define shadow work a little bit. There is a way that shadow work can kind of be defined as looking at the things about yourself that you don't like or you're not super proud of and finding a way to alchemize them into things that you are super proud of and that contribute to your life and your spiritual experience in a positive way. So that's a quick little definition of shadow work. Looking at the things that are unexamined or hidden from your direct perception. Sometimes those things are unexamined or hidden because they are protecting a trauma, and so they hide away so that you can live your life. And then when you have enough space in your life to come back and examine it, then you might have to work through that trauma. Sometimes they're unexamined or hidden because of the cultural context around us that we live in. It just goes unexamined because we are led to believe that it's unimportant. And then let's define sex magic. Sex magic is using pleasure, sensual, and sexual energies to do witchcraft or magic in the same way that you would use tools or breath or body or candle wax or herbs. Using, your body and your sexual experience and your sensual experience of embodiment as a way to conduct magic. So, what do those things look like when they're together? And why is it important? I do talk about the importance of shadow work a lot. If you are familiar with my blog or my witchcraft course, you've seen some content that I have produced about shadow work. I think it's a really important part of magic. And one of the reasons that it's been really important to me is because I do see a lot of value in working through my trauma in order to show up for the world in a better way. And early on in my magical journey, I found therapy and spirituality pretty much at the same time. So the idea of, having an emotional, intellectual, cognitive experience that feeds my spirituality in a positive way, that's really been how I have been able to level up magically, is by examining the things that I'm doing in the magic and the spirit world and noticing how the way I was raised or the culture that's around me, noticing how my shadow influences the way that I'm able to conduct magic. And then I noticed that there's a lot of useful ways to conduct shadow work through psychology and therapy. It's 100% not perfect. It's sexist, it's racist, it's classist. And there's a lot of problems with the psychological industry and the structure of those things. That doesn't mean that I don't think therapy is valuable. I got really lucky and I found an amazing therapist. Sometimes you don't find it on the first try, But if you do believe, that's the thing, is you're capable of so much manifestation and you're capable of drawing things into your life that you want and you need. And the things that block that are not the circumstances around you. They are your shadow. But the circumstances around you feed your shadows and, create blockages. So I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just advocating for therapy. But in the context of sex magic, what I'm trying to do when I conduct sex magic is use the energies of pleasure, arousal, and sensuality, sensual expression, cultivating a healthy relationship with what I call my sexual ego, which is how I show up in the world sexually. And I do so much writing and exploring in this area because it is a part of my nature and part of my purpose here on earth. And in sex magic, what I have noticed is that even though I wasn't really raised religious, I didn't even find Christianity until I was in my adolescent years. And even then, my promiscuous nature, which I love about myself, by the way, I find super attractive and super effective that I'm promiscuous. But in my adolescence, I was kind of discovering my promiscuous nature. And I was discovering it in the only social setting that I was given access to, which was a Methodist church. Whoops. And so what I was able to witness in that time, and I'm so glad that I was soul aware, even though I wasn't as, present, I was very soul aware during that time, and I was accessing God for the first time and having all of these amazing experiences, or accessing God with consciousness instead of, God's blessings raining down, which happened my whole life, even though I was in a traumatized and unfortunate place. God was always there through my childhood. And then in adolescence, I was able to connect back with God. And they're super cool, and they love me very much. But I was confronted with people that had been in the church their whole lives, or had come to the church as a place of redemption for themselves. And so their ideas about sex and sexuality really reflected that. And because I was coming into it fresh and I didn't have any dogma or programming about Christianity, I was really obsessed with understanding the Bible objectively and not accepting the opinions of people that had been brainwashed by Bible school. And so, I started noticing the things about sexuality that were really present in the Bible, which that could be a whole lesson about the way that sex and sensuality is present in the Bible. But that was kind of my first interaction where the culture that I was in was really clashing with what I knew to be true about my sovereign self and my sovereign sexuality. Of course, I didn't know that. I was just like going through intense adolescent puberty and trying to understand my spiritual identity. But I understand now what a huge part of my journey that was to try to unpack and understand those things, because we live in a very Christian leaning culture. And now through my channeling, I understand that in my lineage, there are a lot of past lives and ancestors and people in my support circle that have been very traumatized by Christianity and the way that the structure of Christianity, essentially exists to control people. And that was done intentionally. There was a political moment in our past where Christianity became corrupted over the course of like a century or so. And the witch trials are a huge part of that. So, all of that to say, one of the things that we do in our shadow work around sex magic is unpack the ways that we receive messages about what is pure, what is holy, what is acceptable. We unpack messages about slut shaming, homosexuality, gender queerness, spirituality and sensuality, love and romance and connection, authenticity and intimacy. And I've heard so many people, which is so sad, have a really rough time cultivating a masturbation practice because of their experiences with the church. And this is not people in my lineage from the 13, 14, 16, even 1700s. Goodness. And even more recently than that as well. But when that intentional political decision was made to use this religion in order to control the masses, that set off a domino effect that we are still experiencing. I wouldn't say domino, I'll say frequency, because it really is a sound wave. It set off a frequency that we are still experiencing now, where we have a lot of shame around masturbation, and we have a lot of shame around pleasure and around accessing our sensuality. And even I'm a sex positivity activist. I am doing the work around gender and sexuality. I was unpacking religion, and then I was unpacking mental health, and then I was unpacking witchcraft. And through all of that, I had so much spiritual support that I wasn't aware of, and now I am aware of it, and I still struggle. I still struggle to relax into my pleasure and to relax into my sensuality and to express myself sexually, because the effects are not just mental and emotional and physical for me, but I'm also getting reciprocal feedback from the environment around me, which is people judging me for having my cleavage out, people judging me for accessing my pleasure. And this message that we get that we just don't deserve to feel good, and that feeling good is secondary to working real hard and, participating in the capitalist system. And there were systems in the past that we were told we must participate in before we can access and understand pleasure. We are denied pleasure and embodiment, and it is replaced with this false idea that fulfillment is going to come from over here, when really it's coming from in here. And without access to our sexual pleasure, we don't have a map for how to do that. So, I really want to acknowledge that sex magic isn't easy for everyone. I want to acknowledge that sex magic isn't always easy for me because of these structural dogmas. But as we are conducting sex magic, what I have noticed is that the opportunity for shadow work comes up because there's shame around touching, pubic hair, STIs, our appearance and how we look, all of these messages that I'm blessed to have so many different kinds of privilege, pretty, white, a roof over my head, all of these privileges, which if you watch any of my other videos, I can list them at length, right? And that gives me more access to pleasure because of my privilege. So acknowledging that it gives you access to pleasure to have privilege can help you start unpacking your privilege, which is shadow work. That is shadow work. It's unpacking your privilege. And mourning and grieving the fact that not everybody has access to it because of things that they were born with. And, the consequences of, I won't say consequences, the effects of not doing shadow work look like spiritual bypassing. They look like leaning so far into another dimension that you lose your groundedness here on earth. They look like sex addiction. They look like masturbation addiction and porn addiction, right? So doing our shadow work around sexuality opens up all of these doors for us when conducting sex magic. And I've noticed that the shadow work that I do from that place, it seems so frivolous in the context of our culture, to especially if we are really participating in society, like home ownership, children rearing with, 1 to 2 parents, working a day job, paying taxes, like all of these participations in the system. Then we're like, oh, I'm going to masturbate about my shadow for a while. That seems frivolous, right? And in a way it kind of is. But one of the things that we can do shadow work around is, I don't feel worthy of pleasure. I don't feel like I have time to masturbate. And here's the thing, is crying about that is sex magic. If you feel like you don't have time and space to masturbate, that's sad. You don't actually have to masturbate about that. You can literally just drop into your feeling about that, journal about it, cry about it, and that shadow will come to the light, and in coming to the light, it will offer you new experiences. And that's true for all of these little blockages that we have, all in our light body and in our physical body and in the environment around us. When we're bringing those pieces of shadow to light, we're dropping into the feeling of experience, we're learning to understand the relationship between our emotions and our physical experience. And I did it kind of backwards because I started at the sex magic and then I kind of made my way over to unpacking all this stuff. But I also want to acknowledge that you can start at unpacking all this stuff and then end up at sex magic. So those are my thoughts on that. I'm really praying for everyone right now. There's an excellent opportunity for humanity to wake up to their sexual and sensual sovereignty. It's a fast track to inner alchemy. It really is. Things can be done other ways, and I love that there are so many different ways to do it, but sexual and sensual embodiment is such a fast track to inner alchemy. So I really hope the best for you on your journey, because shadow work is really powerful too. And going into the darkness of ourself doesn't always feel super safe. But as long as you're going within yourself, all of that darkness that's your domain. You're not going anywhere unknown. You've been there before. That's how it got put in darkness in the first place, was your experience in that feeling. So when you go back to the feeling and you experience it again with your intention and your magical power, it transforms your life. And it transforms your perception of life. And it cultivates new beliefs that are just going to send you into your life path and send you into your magic and into your sovereignty. Cool. Okay. If you're interested in any of my workshops around sex magic, polyamory, if you're interested in my witchcraft course so that you can learn about this, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Freudian slip. Drop them so I can make content about them. And let me know what it is that you're curious about and that you want to hear about shadow work and sex magic. Because I don't know everything, but I do have a lot of experience, and I know that I am here on earth to share it. So come at me. I'm sending you lots of love.